there exists a dangerous myth that permeates our society, a seductive lie that has crippled more ambitions than any outright failure ever could. It's the belief that kindness alone will carry you to success, that being agreeable is the same as being strong. Niccolò Machiavelli, the 16th century philosopher, whose name has become synonymous with ruthless pragmatism, would call this what it is: complete nonsense. What if I told you that your niceness might be your greatest weakness? That every time you've bitten your tongue to keep the peace, every time you've said yes when you meant no, every time you've prioritized being liked over being respected, you've been slowly eroding your own power. This isn't cynicism. It's a fundamental truth about human nature that Machiavelli uncovered 5 centuries ago, and it remains just as relevant today. Consider this simple observation from daily life. In any office, in any social circle, in any organization, who actually gets what they want? Is it the person who always accommodates others? Or is it the person who knows when to stand firm? The answer is painfully obvious to anyone willing to see it. Machiavelli didn't create this reality. He simply had the courage to document it when others preferred comforting lies. The modern world has tried to soften Machiavelli's teachings, to water them down into palatable self-help platitudes. But the core truth remains unchanged. Power flows toward those who understand how to wield it. This doesn't mean you need to become some cartoonish villain, stomping on everyone in your path. Machiavelli's real insight was far more sophisticated. It's about developing what we might call strategic assertiveness. Think about the last time you witnessed someone command genuine respect. What qualities did they display? Chances are it wasn't their endless agreeability that impressed you. More likely, it was their ability to set boundaries, to say difficult things when necessary, to project an aura of quiet confidence that said, "I cannot be taken for granted." This is the essence of what Machiavelli taught, not mindless aggression, but the calculated use of strength. History provides countless examples of this principle in action. The leaders who shaped nations, the innovators who changed industries, the individuals who leave lasting marks on the world. None of them achieved what they did by being the nicest person in the room. They understood what Machiavelli knew, that the world is not a meritocracy where good deeds are automatically rewarded. It's a complex arena where perception often matters more than reality, where strength attracts loyalty more reliably than kindness ever could. This brings us to one of Machiavelli's most misunderstood concepts, the distinction between appearances and reality. He famously advised that while it's beneficial to appear virtuous, one must always be prepared to act otherwise when circumstances demand. This isn't about being fake or deceitful as an end in itself. It's about recognizing that in the theater of human interactions, how you're perceived is often more important than who you actually are. The implications of this are profound. That colleague who always seems to get the best assignments, are they really more competent or just better at demonstrating their value? That acquaintance who commands attention when they speak, do they have more important things to say, or do they simply say them with more authority? Machiavelli would argue that these questions answer themselves. But here's what most interpretations of Machiavelli get wrong. This isn't about becoming some manipulative schemer, lying and backstabbing your way to the top. True power, enduring power, comes from developing genuine strength of character, the kind that allows you to be kind when you choose to be, but never because you have to be. It's about cultivating the ability to walk away from unfavorable situations, to say no without apology, to demand what you deserve, rather than hoping it will be given to you. The tragedy is how many people go through life never realizing this. They pour their energy into being accommodating, into avoiding conflict, into making themselves indispensable through sheer agreeability. And then they wonder why they are passed over for promotions, why their relationships feel unbalanced, why they constantly feel taken advantage of. Machiavelli would tell them they've been playing the wrong game entirely. What makes this especially relevant today is how our modern culture has amplified these dynamics. Social media rewards performative kindness while secretly admiring ruthless success. Corporate cultures preach collaboration while promoting those who know how to strategically assert themselves. We live in a world that publicly condemns Machiavellian tactics, while privately rewarding those who employ them skillfully. This isn't a call to abandon morality or basic human decency. It's a wake-up call to recognize that virtue without strength is meaningless, that kindness without boundaries is self-destruction, that in a world where power governs all, understanding how power works isn't optional, it's essential. Machiavelli's real gift wasn't in teaching people how to be ruthless. It was in having the courage to point out that the world already is ruthless, and that those who refuse to see this are doomed to be victims of it. The choice isn't between being kind and being strong. The truly powerful understand how to be both, but always on their own terms. So as you go about your day, pay attention. Notice who gets listened to and who gets ignored. Observe who commands respect and who gets taken for granted. And then ask yourself the most important question of all. Which one are you? The difference between those who wield power and those who beg for scraps comes down to one critical skill: the mastery of controlled aggression. Machiavelli didn't just expose the flaws of excessive niceness. He provided the antidote. But here's where most people fail. They mistake aggression for anger, force for fury, strength for shouting. Nothing could be further from the truth. True controlled aggression operates like a surgical instrument, not a blunt weapon. It's the calculated pause before responding to a provocation. The unshakable eye contact during a negotiation. The willingness to walk away from any deal that doesn't serve you. These are the modern applications of what Machiavelli observed in the courts of Renaissance Florence, where a single misplaced word could mean exile or execution. Consider how this plays out in everyday life. When someone makes an unreasonable request, most people respond in one of two equally ineffective ways. Either they capitulate immediately, breeding resentment in themselves, or they react with emotional outbursts, damaging their reputation. The Machiavellian approach is entirely different. They might respond with a simple, "That doesn't work for me," delivered with such calm finality that no argument follows. This is controlled aggression in action, the ability to assert boundaries without raising your voice, to command respect without demanding it. Machiavelli's most brilliant insight was understanding that power exists in perception. People will test you, consciously or not, to determine what they can get away with. Each time you allow a boundary to be crossed, you train others to disrespect you. But here's the crucial part. You don't need to punish every transgression. You simply need to demonstrate, through carefully chosen moments of pushback, that crossing you carries consequences. Like a lion that only needs to roar occasionally to remind the savannah who rules it. The workplace provides perfect examples of this principle at work. Study any successful executive, and you'll notice they share one trait: selective assertiveness. They're not constantly aggressive. That would make them predictable and exhausting. Instead, they choose strategic moments to flex their authority, often after allowing minor infractions to pass. This creates an aura of unpredictability that keeps others slightly off balance, constantly wondering where the line truly lies. It's not about being cruel, it's about being calculated. Social dynamics reveal the same pattern. In any friend group, there's usually one person who somehow always gets their way. Observe them closely. You'll notice they've mastered the art of saying no without apology, of changing plans to suit themselves, of making their preferences known without concern for approval. They're not necessarily the loudest or most domineering. Often they're quite the opposite. But they've internalized what Machiavelli knew, that people naturally defer to those who act like they deserve deference. This brings us to the most practical application of controlled aggression: the power of silence. In our era of constant communication, the ability to withhold response has become a superpower. When challenged, most people feel compelled to immediately justify, explain, or defend themselves. The strategically aggressive individual understands that sometimes the most powerful move is to say nothing at all. Let the other person sit with their words. Let them wonder what you're thinking. This creates psychological space where respect grows. Financial negotiations provide perhaps the clearest demonstration of these principles. The party who speaks first about numbers usually loses. The person who can comfortably sit through awkward silences gains advantage. The individual willing to walk away from any deal holds all the power. These aren't just business tactics. They're manifestations of the same human dynamics Machiavelli observed in political dealings 5 centuries ago. The technology has changed. Human nature hasn't. But here's what separates true mastery from crude manipulation. Controlled aggression must be rooted in genuine self-worth. People can sense when assertiveness comes from insecurity rather than strength. That's why Machiavelli emphasized the importance of cultivating real competence alongside the appearance of power. The best way to command respect is to actually be formidable, to develop skills that make you indispensable, knowledge that makes you authoritative, and judgment that makes you reliable. The modern world has created new arenas for these ancient power dynamics. Social media, for instance, rewards those who understand the balance between engagement and mystery. The most influential accounts aren't those that post constantly or respond to every comment. They're the ones that maintain an air of selective accessibility, that understand the power of absence as much as presence. This is digital age Machiavellianism, the strategic control of your own visibility to maximize impact. Perhaps the most important lesson about controlled aggression is this: it's not something you turn on and off. It's a mindset that permeates all your interactions. It's the way you enter a room, the way you hold eye contact, the way you refuse to rush your speech when others interrupt. These micro-behaviors accumulate into an undeniable presence that others instinctively recognize. Machiavelli would call this the essence of princely virtue, the ability to project authority without saying a word. As we examine our own lives through this lens, certain truths become unavoidable. That promotion you didn't get, the relationship where you feel taken for granted, the social situations where you feel invisible. These aren't accidents of fate. They're the predictable outcomes of failing to master controlled aggression. The good news is that this skill can be learned, like any other. It begins with recognizing that power isn't given, it's taken, and continues with understanding that how you take it matters just as much as whether you take it at all. The greatest misconception about Machiavelli's philosophy is that it requires abandoning morality altogether. Nothing could be further from the truth. The real challenge, the sophisticated challenge, lies in wielding power effectively while maintaining your humanity. This is the razor's edge that separates true strategic mastery from mere brutishness. Machiavelli never advocated for cruelty as an end in itself. His famous passage about whether it's better to be loved or feared concludes with a nuanced answer. Ideally both. But if you must choose, choose to be feared. What most readers miss is the crucial qualifier: feared, but not hated. This distinction makes all the difference. You can command respect through strength while avoiding the pitfalls of tyranny. You can be formidable without becoming monstrous. Consider the most respected leaders in any field. They are not the bullies who rule through terror, nor are they the pushovers who beg for compliance. They operate in that narrow band where authority meets approachability. This is the sweet spot Machiavelli actually described: the ability to make difficult decisions when necessary, while maintaining enough goodwill that people follow you voluntarily. The key lies in understanding that power and humanity aren't opposites. They're complementary forces when properly balanced. The first principle of ethical power is selective enforcement. Just as a wise parent doesn't punish every minor infraction, an effective leader doesn't assert dominance at every opportunity. Machiavelli observed that the most successful rulers allowed certain small freedoms while being utterly uncompromising on fundamental matters. This creates psychological breathing room. People feel autonomous in day-to-day matters while understanding there are inviolable boundaries. In modern terms, this might translate to overlooking minor workplace tardiness while being absolutely firm about project deadlines, or forgiving occasional social cancellations while never tolerating genuine disrespect. The second principle is proportional response. Nothing erodes respect faster than overreacting to minor slights. Machiavelli warned against rulers who made mountains out of molehills, seeing insults where none were intended. The strategically assertive individual conserves their aggressive energy for truly important battles. They understand that credibility depends on judicious use of power, not constant displays of force. When you do choose to respond, your actions carry more weight because they're not diluted by petty squabbles. Here's where most people fail in applying these principles. They swing between two extremes, either tolerating everything until they explode disproportionately, or asserting themselves constantly until no one takes them seriously. The Machiavellian approach is entirely different. It involves maintaining a calm baseline while making it clear there exists another gear of intensity that can be engaged when truly necessary. People respect this controlled potential far more than either constant aggression or endless passivity. The third principle is perhaps the most counterintuitive: strategic vulnerability. Machiavelli understood that absolute invulnerability breeds paranoia and isolation. The most effective rulers allowed select moments of humanity to show, not weakness, but relatability. In modern terms, this might mean occasionally admitting mistakes, when doing so serves your credibility. showing carefully chosen personal details to build connection, or even deliberately conceding minor points to maintain goodwill for more important battles. This isn't about being fake. It's about understanding that total emotional armor can be as limiting as total exposure. Consider how this plays out in professional settings. The executive who never admits any fault eventually loses credibility. The colleague who never shares personal details seems robotic and untrustworthy. The friend who never compromises becomes exhausting. Machiavelli would recognize these as failures of strategy, not morality. The truly powerful understand that selective, calculated vulnerability can be a strength when used intentionally rather than compulsively. The fourth principle is legacy thinking. Machiavelli constantly emphasized the importance of considering how actions would be perceived over time. This is where many aggressive individuals fail. They win battles, but lose wars by not considering long-term consequences. Every exercise of power should be evaluated not just by its immediate effect, but by how it positions you for future interactions. The parent who constantly yells may get short-term compliance, but breeds long-term resentment. The manager who rules through fear may hit quarterly targets, but lose top talent. The friend who always dominates conversations eventually finds themselves alone. This is why Machiavelli placed such emphasis on reputation management. He advised rulers to cultivate certain virtuous appearances, even when reality was more complex. In modern terms, this translates to being mindful of your personal brand, not in a manipulative sense, but in understanding that perception accumulates over time. The occasional assertive action, when framed properly within an overall reputation for fairness, carries more weight than constant aggression. The fifth and most important principle is self-awareness. Machiavelli's entire philosophy rests on clear-eyed assessment of reality, starting with assessment of oneself. Before seeking to influence others, you must understand your own tendencies, triggers, and weaknesses. Are you naturally too aggressive and need to temper it? Or are you prone to passivity and need to develop more assertiveness? The worst outcomes occur when people try to adopt Machiavellian tactics without this foundational self-knowledge. Practical application begins with small daily exercises of controlled assertion. Practice saying no to minor requests that inconvenience you. Experiment with allowing silences in conversations rather than rushing to fill them. Observe how people respond when you maintain steady eye contact instead of glancing away. These micro-behaviors build the muscle of strategic assertiveness without requiring dramatic confrontations. The psychological shift is just as important as the behavioral one. Begin viewing yourself as someone who deserves respect rather than hopes for it. Notice how this changes your posture, your speech patterns, even your gait. People respond unconsciously to these subtle confidence indicators. Machiavelli understood that power begins internally before manifesting externally. Ultimately, the goal isn't to become Machiavellian in the cartoonish sense of the word. It's to develop what we might call enlightened self-interest, the ability to navigate the world as it actually is, not as we wish it were, while maintaining moral compass. To recognize that power dynamics exist in every human interaction without reducing all interactions to power struggles. To understand that true strength includes the capacity for kindness, but never at the expense of self-respect. Machiavelli's real lesson wasn't that the world is cruel. It was that the world is complex, and those who understand its complexities fare better than those who cling to simplistic ideals. The balanced individual recognizes that sometimes kindness is the strongest move, and sometimes strength is the kindest option. They know when to extend trust and when to demand accountability. They understand that power, like fire, can illuminate or destroy. The difference lies in how it's wielded.